Hello, my miraculous friend. This is Reverend Frances Fayden, and welcome to the Magnify Your Miracles podcast. I'm really excited to be talking about today's topic of is alcohol okay on the spiritual path, especially for highly sensitive people. And before we get started, let's just take a few deep breaths together just to get ourselves really grounded and centered. I want you to be as open and relaxed when you're pondering this topic with me as you possibly can be. So go ahead and take a few deep breaths. Again, if you're driving in a car, just keep your eyes open. We don't want anybody to have any accidents. So allow yourself to take a few deep breaths, focusing on your breathing, bringing your awareness to your beautiful body temple and into this beautiful present moment. Letting go of whatever happened before, whatever might be happening after, and just giving yourself the gift of this beautiful moment. And as you let yourself begin to tune into the vibration of miracles that is all around you and is within you, and is in fact who you are, feeling so grateful for that energy, knowing that that energy is always blessing you. Let's take one more deep breath together with as much gratitude as possible. And we can begin. Well, thank you so much for taking that few moments with me to get centered and grounded. Happy New Year to you. If you're listening to this in January, a lot of people are making their goals and their New Year's resolutions. And that's why I wanted to talk about this subject of alcohol, because people often email me because I am a spiritual mentor. I'm a spiritual success coach. I work with people individually. I've been on the spiritual path for a long time. I even lived in a spiritual community for 6 years, which was really an amazing and intense experience in many ways. And so people will often ask me for my opinion. And what I like to do is share my experience with you, because opinions are a dime a dozen. But I can share my real life experience with you, both personally as well as my experience working with thousands of people over all these years that I've been doing spiritual healing work, intuitive counseling work, spiritual coaching work, all the work that I've done. You know, after a while, you start to see that pretty much we all are dealing with the same thing, myself included. So some people have asked me, is it okay for me to be drinking alcohol as someone who is on the spiritual path? And this is a really important topic. And the things I'm going to tell you today, I'm going to ask you to listen and use your own discernment, meditate on what I'm sharing with you, but also that you can use what I'm sharing with you for a lot of other topics. It doesn't just have to be alcohol. You could use this for any substance or anything that you might be, even if you're wondering, is this interfering with my spiritual growth? Chances are it probably is, just the fact that you're asking the question. But this will give you some guideline of how you can discern that, because that's my goal for you. I'm never here to tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing. And I'm definitely not here to tell you what's right and wrong. I'm very, very practical. And my motto is do what works and stop doing what doesn't work. And that's pretty much what you're going to hear from me. So this can be a really confusing subject because there are some religions that absolutely forbid any alcohol consumption of any kind. No wine, no nothing. Can't have anything. And yet we have some of the major world religions in which wine is a central part of their most sacred celebrations. And for myself, having been raised Catholic, I know that the very first miracle that was recorded anyway, that Jesus performed is turning the water into wine at the wedding at Cana, and that his mom specifically asked him to help him do that because they were running out of wine. And so you could be scratching your head saying, well, if Jesus is going to a party and they run out of wine and his first miracle is turning water into wine, how bad can it be? It's a really good point, right? And at the same time, we have his cousin, St. John the Baptist, who wasn't allowed to touch a drop of it. And here's John the Baptist, who living out in the desert, very much like an ascetic, had a very, very limited diet. And yet he's the one that leads the way for the Christ consciousness. He's the one that baptizes people and actually baptizes Christ himself and is able to channel that Holy Spirit energy in that incident. So that's really confusing right there, isn't it? It's like, okay, we have these two powerful spiritual beings giving us very different ways of living our lives. Now, one of the things you want to look at, and this is the way that I look at it, is John the Baptist and Jesus were not at the same level spiritually. And John the Baptist refers to this and says, I'm not even worthy to, tie your shoes or whatever it might be. And here you're coming to me. You should be baptizing me. And Jesus says to him, no, we're supposed to do it this way. So please do this. And then of course he does. But that tells us right there that John the Baptist had not yet reached that level of spiritual maturity where he wouldn't be affected by the alcohol. But Jesus had reached that level. Jesus was able to, let's face it, he had mastered the laws of nature. He was able to walk on water. He was able to raise the dead. He was able to do all kinds of miracles because he had mastered the material world. And he even says that. A lot of people wonder what it means when he says, be of good cheer because I have overcome the world. I've always taken that to mean I have overcome the ordinary rules of nature and I'm living by spiritual law. And in my opinion, was here to teach us how to live by spiritual law. So if you're someone who is living by spiritual law alone and you can walk on water, feel free to eat and drink anything that you want. I'm not there yet personally. The other thing that's confusing for people that, especially if you're Christian, is that people in the Bible, there's a story of people coming to Jesus and asking about, there's so many rules in Judaism at the time of can you eat this and can you eat that? And what about this and what about that? And Jesus's response to that in that time was, you should be more concerned about what's coming out of your mouth than what's going into your mouth. And people have misinterpreted that to mean, oh, you can eat whatever you want. And I don't think that he meant that. I think he meant if you're watching everything that you're eating and you're not eating this and you're not eating that, and you're spewing hateful speech, that's going to harm your soul more than eating some shellfish. I think that was his point. But again, people have misinterpreted, and I could be misinterpreting it. This stuff is open to interpretation. So let's get back to our subject of alcohol. And what I'm going to share with you is what I use. This is what I use when I'm trying to get to the essence and the truth of something. When we're given spiritual teachings in any scripture, we want to remember that it's given to us in a context. And that context is the time period and it's the culture that you're in. And it also is being interpreted through the people at that particular time. Now, wine was a really important thing in the Middle East 2,000 years ago, probably still is today, but it was a really important thing back then. And so you're going to hear a lot of comments in the New Testament, especially about you can't pour new wine into old wineskins and all of that. So that was very central to the culture, which is one of the reasons why I think that was one of the miracles that had happened. But since that time, people have taken things, and especially the teachings in the Old Testament, and put them into the category of good, bad, right, and wrong. And whenever you're in the place of trying to discern if something is good or bad, right or wrong, you are at the level of mind that I call the ego level. You're in black and white. It's good or it's bad. It's right or it's wrong. And I don't find in my interactions with Mother Mary or on the spiritual path that that's how spirit communicates with me. Why would we be given a certain teaching? So again, if you take like the 10 Commandments, and I've written about this in my book, if you want to check it out, Meditation is Friendship with God. I have a chapter where I talk about the 10 Commandments and I change what they're called. I don't call them the commandments. They're the 10 guidelines or the 10 suggestions. And they're given to us not to hurt us, but for our benefit. And again, Jesus had said to us about the Sabbath. That's one of the commandments, is to keep the Sabbath holy, right? Jesus says to us, the Sabbath is meant for man. It's meant for you, not you for the Sabbath. You're not supposed to make yourself crazy trying to keep the Sabbath. God is saying to you, you're going to need rest. And this is really important. And I want you to take a day where you give yourself a day of spiritual rejuvenation. That's for you. If you look at the 10 Commandments from that perspective of how are these loving suggestions from my Creator who knows me so well and wants me to thrive here on the planet. It's very different than a list of do's and don'ts. And if you do the wrong thing, you're going to get punished, right? That's not a very helpful way. So the good and bad, right and wrong is not helpful. And I'm not trying to tell you not to have thoughts of like something is right or wrong. Step out of that for a moment and ask yourself, why? Why would I be advised to not drink alcohol? Why would that be a helpful spiritual teaching in some religions? Why would that be the case? If you look at it from that perspective, then you get to go deeper and you say, well, if I'm looking at the spiritual path and the aim of the spiritual path, and I'm looking at alcohol and how alcohol affects me, that gives you a guideline. So for example, the goal of the spiritual path is absolute awareness. Some people call it self-realization or nirvana or enlightenment. It's becoming absolutely aware, meaning that you're completely aware of your true nature as a divine being, completely aware of it. And so all of your senses are alive and heightened, and you know your oneness with the universe, which is why we do spiritual practices. And what do? We practice concentration. We practice meditation. We do physical exercises to release any tension in our body so that our energy can go where? Up. We can raise our energy. When we raise our energy, we raise our awareness. And again, we have to be careful about high vibration, low vibration, as if that's good and bad. We're talking about levels of awareness. So you think about it as like being in an elevator. The ground floor of the elevator is not bad. You just can't see very far. And then you go up to the next level and then the next level. And if you have one of those elevators that's like on the outside of a building and it's all glass, which sometimes those are terrifying, those elevators. But don't you notice that when you go higher in the elevator, now you can see. The bottom floor wasn't bad. It just was limited. Your ability to take in your surroundings is limited. The higher you go in the elevator, the broader your ability to see. This is where we start to see our connection to everything. Whereas when you're in that bottom floor of the elevator, all you see is what's right in front of you. Again, not good, bad, right, or wrong, just limited. So when we're talking about spiritual practices, we're doing things to raise our level of awareness so that we can expand what's possible for us. This is one of the ways that you magnify your miracles. You expand your level of awareness. You now see what's possible where you didn't see it before. The truth is it was always there, but you just were on a different floor in the elevator. And this is why spiritual practices are there to help us become more aware. It's called refining your awareness. So we do focus exercises, we do concentration exercises. We become more and more conscious. That's the goal, is to become more and more conscious. So what does alcohol do? Well, you know everything that alcohol does because you probably heard it for a long time and how it can impair you when you're driving a car and all that. And that's fine. I want to focus on it and how does it affect you and your level of awareness. So what do we know about alcohol? It dulls your awareness. And at first you have a little bit of a sense of relaxation and euphoria. And that's why people like it, right? Because it makes you feel good initially. It lowers some of your inhibitions, but it also dulls your awareness and it dulls your mental clarity. Eventually you can start to have less of a sense of control. Whereas on the spiritual path, we're doing exercises to give you more control, to increase your concentration. Alcohol impairs your ability to concentrate. It's also a sedative. It has a depressing effect on you, which is the opposite goal of the spiritual path. And it's the opposite goal of spiritual practices is the goal is joy and bliss and love and all these beautiful qualities. And alcohol has the opposite effect. It's going to be bringing your energy down. It's a sedative, and eventually it can lead to depression. So based on those things only, just if you look at those things, you can see that alcohol isn't really compatible with the goal of the spiritual path if you're using it in a way that, dulls your awareness and brings your energy down. Okay? Now, that being said, I'm never an all or nothing person. I think every person has to decide for themselves. So here's what I'm going to ask you to think about. Are you simply wanting to have a glass of wine with your dinner? You're somebody that you love food, you love pairing alcohol with certain foods because you love the way that it, great. If you know in your heart that you're going to have a little bit and you're going to have it with your meal and it's basically a complement to that, beautiful. You know yourself, you can trust yourself. But I'm going to ask you to be careful. If you find that you're having a glass of wine at the end of the day, every day, as a means of relaxation, because you can't relax any other way, now that's a red flag. Because now there's a dependency that's there. You're using the alcohol for something that it's really not intended for. It's not meant to be the thing that helps you deal with your stress. It's meant to be something that you can enjoy with your meal or whatever that might be. That's kind of the point of it. The other thing is, if you have a family history of depression or you yourself deal with depression, it's not a good idea. If you have a family history of mental health problems or alcoholism, it's not a good idea. And the other thing that people don't really talk about is if you're highly sensitive to sugar, it's really not a good idea. I've found that people who are highly sensitive to sugar are really highly sensitive to alcohol. Now, as a highly sensitive person, I don't usually recommend that people have a lot of alcohol. Again, I'm not going to tell you not to do it, but highly sensitive people are the ones that tend to gravitate towards substances because they don't know how to manage their sensitivity. They don't know how to stop feeling everything that they're feeling. And so that's when they'll seek out alcohol, drugs, food, sex, shopping, you name it, whatever it is. And, we've all done these things. I'm not pointing the finger at anybody. I've done these things myself. But especially if you're a highly creative person and you're trying to manage all that energy and you don't know how to do it, that's what people can do. And that's where you get in trouble. And I'm really saying this as your friend and saying, you know what, it's okay. If you have found that you're doing this, it's okay. Just recognize that you didn't understand that it was something that you were doing that might be problematic, and maybe get a little support around changing that habit. If you're doing this because you have a lot of stress, maybe learn to meditate or just start with some yoga, or maybe you start exercising, or you can work with somebody like me and I can help you learn how to manage your energy, because that's what I specialize in, is helping highly sensitive, highly creative people who want to learn how to master their own energy. That's a big piece of the work that I do. And the truth is your energy field will tell you whether or not alcohol is for you. The last thing I'll share with you too is, in my experience, what I have found on the spiritual path is when you start doing things, when you start praying to Mother Mary, you start doing your meditation, you start to clean up your diet, you're taking better care of yourself, alcohol will affect you more than it used to. And people will say, I feel like I'm getting more sensitive. And the truth is what's happening is you're not covering up your sensitivity anymore. And so it seems like you're more sensitive, but you've probably been this sensitive the whole time. And what's happening now is you're feeling it. You're actually feeling it. You're feeling the impact of when you eat some junk food, or you're feeling the impact of when you have an unhealthy relationship, or whatever it might be. You're feeling the impact of that. So as you are thinking about your new year, you're thinking about making some changes, really think of it through the lens of yourself as a highly sensitive, highly creative person. Are you giving yourself an outlet for your creativity? Are you managing your stress really well? And don't tell yourself, I'm never going to have any alcohol. Because as soon as you do that, you're going to rebel against that, because now we're in the good, bad category. Let yourself see, let yourself try it. Let yourself experiment. How do you feel? Do you feel better after you drink it, or do you not feel better? Does it make you feel funny? Does it make you feel great? You decide. Give yourself permission, but do it with awareness. Do it with awareness. That's the most important thing. And that really is the key to magnifying your miracles. Remember, I'm talking about that elevator energy, right? So if we think about the miracles in our lives, they're right there. That's why I say your miracle's already here. But when we're on the bottom floor of that elevator, and maybe we're dealing with depression or other problems, we have a lot of stress in our lives, and we're not taking time to even go to the second floor. And that could be that you go out for a walk, and then you're going to the third floor, and maybe that's you talk to a really good friend and you get into a happier space. And then you go to the fourth floor, and maybe that is where you're changing your diet a little bit. And the fifth floor might be meditation. There's a lot of steps. It doesn't have to be like you immediately go to meditation. And once you start getting into that place, now you're going to be like, I see things, I see possibility that I didn't see before. Now, I have a lot of other things that I could say about alcohol that I'm not going to say right now, because I don't think you really need to know all that about the other things about alcohol. But I do think it's important for you to focus in on, how does it make me feel? How does it make me feel? And is it making me more aware or less aware? And am I leaning on it? If you're leaning on it, that's when you have to be careful. And that's true with anything: shopping, eating, sex, money, whatever. If you're leaning on it to make yourself feel differently, then you want to take a step back and say, what else is possible for me? All right, my miraculous friend, that is what I wanted to share with you. In the show notes, I am going to put a link if you want to check out my book. It's called Meditation is Friendship with God. I'll put a link there for you as well. And again, if you have enjoyed this episode, I'm so grateful if you could leave a review on iTunes, and also please let your friends know about it. I would really appreciate that as well. So just remember, the key to magnifying your miracles is to really know in your heart that that miracle is already here. God bless you. Bye-bye.